without thinking about it, you just took a breath. You've done it around 20,000 times today. You'll do it another 20,000 times tomorrow. Your body has been doing it since the moment you were born, and it will keep doing it until the moment you die. And in all that time, no one ever sat you down and taught you how. That's the strange part. Because it turns out, most people are doing it wrong. Not just slightly wrong. Profoundly, measurably, physiologically wrong. In ways that are making them more anxious, more tired, more sick, and they have no idea. This is the story of breath. What it actually is. What your ancient ancestors knew about it that you've forgotten. And why the way you breathe right now might be quietly changing your brain, your blood, your sleep, and the way you feel every single day. Take a breath right now. Go ahead. Notice what moves. If your chest rose, you're doing it the way most modern humans do it. A shallow lift of the ribcage, pulling in a thin column of air that barely reaches the bottom of your lungs. It feels normal. It feels like breathing. But physiologically, it is one of the least efficient ways your body can move oxygen into your bloodstream. Here's what should happen. When you take a proper breath, your diaphragm, a dome-shaped sheet of muscle sitting just below your lungs, contracts and flattens downward. This pulls your lungs open from the bottom up, like bellows. Your belly expands outward. Air floods in not just to the top of your lungs, but all the way down to the base, where the majority of your blood oxygen exchange actually happens. Then, slowly, the diaphragm releases. The belly falls. The air flows out. That's it. That's breathing. But watch most adults breathe, and you'll see something different. Chests rising and falling. Shoulders lifting. Shallow, fast, upper chest cycles that fill only a fraction of available lung capacity. It looks like breathing. But it's closer to panting. How did this happen? Why did so many people drift so far from something the human body was designed to do? The answer begins about 6 million years ago, and it involves a series of evolutionary trade-offs that were brilliant for survival and disastrous for your sinuses. When your distant ancestors were still walking on 4 limbs, they breathed primarily through the nose. The snout, elongated, wide-nostriled, was a remarkable piece of biological engineering. Air came in, got filtered by nasal hairs, humidified by moist membranes, warmed to body temperature, and scrubbed of particles before it ever reached the lungs. The bones inside the nasal cavity, called turbinates, created a turbulent pathway that maximized contact between incoming air and the vascular tissue that processed it. Then your ancestors started standing upright. The skull changed. The face flattened. The jaw shortened and pulled inward. The nasal passage narrowed. And over millions of years, the human face became something unprecedented in the animal kingdom, a nearly flat plane, a short nose, a relatively shallow sinus cavity. Beautiful, perhaps, by certain cultural standards. But architecturally, a disaster. Stanford professor and otolaryngologist Jaikar Nayak has spent years studying the human nasal passage and concluded that modern humans have smaller, more obstructed nasal cavities than almost any other mammal on Earth. We lost enormous filtering capacity. We lost humidification efficiency. And increasingly, we lost the ability to breathe through our noses comfortably at all. And then we made it worse. Around 10,000 years ago, when humans began farming and eating processed grain, the jaw began to change more rapidly than it had in any previous era. Paleoanthropologist Daniel Lieberman at Harvard has documented this shift in extraordinary detail. Pre-agricultural skulls show wide, well-developed jaws with straight, uncrowded teeth. Post-agricultural skulls begin showing narrowing palates, impacted wisdom teeth, misaligned bites. The softer food didn't give the jaw the mechanical stress it needed during development to grow to its full, natural size. A narrower jaw means a higher palate. A higher palate means a more compressed nasal passage. A more compressed nasal passage makes nose breathing harder, more effortful, more likely to be abandoned in favor of the easier route. The mouth. Mouth breathing feels easy. And it is easy. But it bypasses nearly every protective system your nose was built to provide. Unfiltered air carries allergens, dust, bacteria, and viruses directly into your respiratory tract. Unhumidified air dries out the mucous membranes that are supposed to trap those particles. Unwarmed air creates minor vascular constriction in the bronchial tubes, reducing airflow efficiency. And breathing through your mouth activates your body's sympathetic nervous system, the same system that triggers your fight or flight response, creating a subtle, constant baseline of physiological stress. James Nestor, a journalist who spent years researching the science of breathing and documented it in meticulous detail, underwent an extraordinary experiment at Stanford University. He and a colleague had their nasal passages plugged with silicone for 10 days, forcing them to breathe exclusively through their mouths. The results were disturbing. Blood pressure elevated. Sleep quality collapsed. Snoring increased dramatically. Both men showed early markers of sleep apnea within days. Stress hormone levels rose. And after the plugs were removed and nasal breathing resumed, nearly every metric reversed within days. 10 days. That's how fast the body responds. But it's not just about the nose versus the mouth. It's about the rate. The average modern adult takes between 12 and 20 breaths per minute. That number has been climbing steadily for decades, correlated with rising rates of anxiety, poor posture, and sedentary lifestyles. But research into optimal respiratory physiology keeps pointing to a much lower number, around 5 to 6 breaths per minute, taken slowly, deeply, through the nose. At this rate, something remarkable happens in your blood chemistry. You've probably heard of carbon dioxide as a waste product. Something to get rid of. Something you exhale because your body doesn't want it. But that's not the whole story. Carbon dioxide plays a critical role in oxygen delivery, a mechanism first described in detail by the Danish physiologist Christian Bohr in 1904, now known as the Bohr Effect. Here's how it works. Oxygen is carried in your bloodstream attached to hemoglobin molecules. But hemoglobin doesn't just release oxygen anywhere. It releases oxygen in the presence of carbon dioxide. Specifically, in tissues where carbon dioxide concentration is high, because those are the tissues that are working hardest, metabolizing fastest, needing oxygen most urgently. When you breathe too fast, when you overbreathe, you exhale carbon dioxide faster than your cells produce it. CO2 levels in the blood drop. And hemoglobin, deprived of the chemical signal it needs, holds onto its oxygen more tightly. You're breathing more, but paradoxically delivering less oxygen to the cells that need it. You feel breathless. You feel anxious. Your body responds by breathing faster. A vicious cycle. Slow the breath down, and the entire system rebalances. CO2 rises to optimal levels. Hemoglobin releases oxygen efficiently. The heart doesn't have to work as hard. Blood vessels dilate slightly. And your nervous system, detecting lower respiratory rate, longer exhales, stable blood chemistry, shifts toward the parasympathetic state. Rest and digest, rather than fight or flight. This is not alternative medicine. This is physiology. It is taught in medical schools. It is documented in peer-reviewed journals. And yet almost no one talks about it in terms of something you can consciously control. But there are cultures that figured this out a very long time ago. Yoga traditions in India developed pranayama, formalized breathing practices, somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 years ago. The word itself breaks down into prana, meaning life force or breath, and ayama, meaning extension or control. The specific techniques vary, but the underlying physiology converges: slower breathing rates, extended exhales, nasal-only breathing, pauses between cycles. Buddhist meditation traditions, Taoist Qigong practices, the hesychast prayer traditions of Eastern Orthodox Christianity, all arrived independently at breathing practices that modern science is now able to explain in mechanistic detail. Slower. Deeper. Longer exhales. Nose. Even in the Western tradition, there are hints. Ancient Greek texts describe pneumon breath, air, the animating spirit, as central to health and consciousness in ways that were dismissed as metaphysics but may have carried more physiological insight than was recognized. The modern world, though, moved in the opposite direction. Industrialization, indoor life, synthetic food, chronic stress, all of it conspired to turn breathing into something faster, shallower, more anxious, more oral. And because it happens automatically, because you don't have to think about it, the drift went unnoticed. Generation by generation, breath by breath. Your own breathing habits began forming before you can remember. During infancy, before the airway has calcified into its adult shape, before the jaw is fully developed, breathing patterns are established partly by environment. Chronic allergies in early childhood lead to habitual mouth breathing. Mouth breathing during development affects the shape of the face and jaw, narrowing the palate further, compressing the nasal passage more, making nasal breathing harder in adulthood. It becomes a self-reinforcing loop, written into the very architecture of your skull. And then there is sleep. For most people, breathing during sleep is an afterthought. But it's one of the most important things your body does during those hours. Growth hormone is released primarily in deep sleep. Cellular repair happens in deep sleep. Memory consolidation, emotional processing, immune function all peak during the sleep stages that require sustained, uninterrupted rest. Mouth breathing during sleep is consistently associated with worse sleep quality, more frequent nighttime waking, lower blood oxygen levels, more snoring, and higher rates of sleep apnea. Sleep apnea, the repeated cessation of breathing during sleep, now affects an estimated 1 billion people worldwide, and the vast majority remain undiagnosed. Many of them are mouth breathers who have never been told that habit alone may be degrading the quality of their sleep night after night. Nasal breathing during sleep activates different physiological states. The nose produces nitric oxide, a molecule that dilates blood vessels and improves oxygen uptake in the lungs, and production spikes during nasal breathing in ways it doesn't during oral breathing. Nasal breathing during sleep keeps the airway more stable, creates more resistance that keeps breathing slow and rhythmic, and supports the deeper sleep stages where your body does its most important work. There are people who have figured this out in unconventional ways. A growing community of health researchers, athletes, and biohackers have begun taping their mouths shut at night, a strip of medical tape or purpose-made tape across the lips to ensure nasal breathing during sleep. The results they report are striking enough that sleep researchers are beginning to study it formally. Less snoring. Better energy the next day. Reduction in apnea episodes in mild cases. It sounds extreme. It is, in some ways. But it's also a proxy for what your nose was always supposed to be doing. Athletic performance is another domain where breath is quietly determining outcomes. The Buteyko method, developed by Ukrainian physician Konstantin Buteyko in the 1950s, is built around the observation that asthmatics consistently overbreathe, exhaling too much CO2 and maintaining chronically low levels in their blood. Buteyko's protocol involves dramatically slowing the breath, learning to tolerate the sensation of air hunger, the slight breathlessness that occurs when you train your body to function with higher CO2 tolerance, and transitioning to near-exclusive nasal breathing. Multiple clinical trials have since confirmed that Buteyko-based training reduces asthma symptoms and the need for rescue inhalers in many patients. Elite athletes have taken similar principles and found performance gains that pharmacology couldn't account for. Nasal breathing during lower-intensity exercise builds CO2 tolerance and trains the respiratory system to operate more efficiently at higher effort levels. It feels harder at first. Your instinct is to open your mouth and gulp air. But athletes who train through that discomfort report that at maximum effort, their body's ability to extract and use oxygen is markedly improved. Your ancestors knew less about hemoglobin and nitric oxide than modern science does. But they knew something your modern life has obscured, that the way you breathe shapes the way you feel. Not metaphorically. Biochemically. Neurologically. The pace of your breath determines your nervous system state. It determines how much oxygen your cells actually receive. It determines how deeply you sleep, how clearly you think, how quickly you recover from exertion and stress. You've been breathing for your entire life. And almost certainly, you've been doing it a little bit wrong. Not because you're broken. Not because something failed in you. But because the world you live in the soft food, the narrow jaw, the indoor air, the chronic low-grade stress, the forward-leaning posture over screens, the mouth that falls open without anyone ever telling you to close it quietly, invisibly, over years, nudged you away from the thing your body was designed to do. The good news is that the body is responsive. Startlingly so. Breathe through your nose and the nasal passages begin to clear. Slow down your breathing rate and your blood chemistry rebalances within minutes. Extend your exhale slightly longer than your inhale and your heart rate variability improves, which is one of the most reliable measures of autonomic nervous system health that we have. The practices are almost embarrassingly simple. Breathe in through the nose for 4 counts. Out through the nose for 6. Repeat. Let the belly expand before the chest. Take fewer breaths per minute, not more. And at night, when you can't control it consciously, keep your mouth closed. That's it. That's the whole thing. Your body was built for this. Your diaphragm already knows what to do. Your nasal passages, however narrow, are still functional. The system is intact. It just needs to be used the way it was designed. Tonight, when you fall asleep, your body is going to breathe without you. It's been doing that for as long as you've been alive. The question is whether, from here on, you're going to let it do it right.